Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is the Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
You'll have to forgive me. I've got kind of a raspy voice tonight. I'm going to give you what I got for what it's worth. I've been looking forward to the show all day. I posted a note earlier this morning saying we were going to be talking about homeschooling and a highly polarized response. A very passionate debate on my Facebook page continues even now, almost 12 hours later. What I expected is as soon as I bring up homeschooling, the vast majority of people were going to say, geez, it's a surefire way to screw up your kids. But that's not what happened. Now, I'm going to relate a perspective, and I don't want you to jump down my throat if you are for homeschooling or you've had a positive experience, because I'm going somewhere with this, okay? But being in the Midwest in a great, it's this, there's a lot of good schools around here. There are a lot of great institutes of learning, but a lot of people homeschool their children. And almost, I think all of them that I know do it in a religious capacity. It's a Christian homeschool. And I think I can safely say all of them are weird. Just hang on. Just hang on. Just hang on. They were taken out of public school, or they were never introduced to public school because of the evil influences out there in the world. Okay? So to protect them from those evil influences, these parents kept them home. Father goes off, works a job full-time, mom stays home, raises the kids, and homeschools them. And it's a Christian curriculum. In my experience is that they're all Christian curriculums. I know that there are atheist homeschoolers. We're going to get into that, and I'm fascinated by it. But the ones I've seen, the ones around here, the examples that I have seen firsthand, they're all six-day creation, Noah's Ark, Jesus died on the cross, the book of Revelation, Bible, believing, Bible teaching, Christian-based homeschool. And they kept their kids out of public school because they wanted to protect them from all the stuff that they're afraid teenagers are eventually going to do, like sex, alcohol, drugs, and God forbid they ever use the word shit. So they keep them home. I'm thinking about it, and I've got, here's a great story. And he's a great kid. I won't tell you, I'll call him Sam. His name isn't Sam, but I'll call him Sam. It was years ago. He was an intern for the company that I work for, and he was learning to do video production. I was going on a video shoot in South Carolina, and I thought, well, this would be a great opportunity for him to come and learn the business. He was an intern, right? He was kind of a shadow. He was just sponging it up. And so we hopped on a plane and we went. Now, he's homeschooled. His mom is one of those stereotypical, absolutely wispy, Jesus, 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 Jesus. She can't really be this sweet Jesus, Jesus, Jesus types. He comes from, I don't know how many kids are in the family. They're all squeaky clean. And the guy is really smart, as in book smart, as in straight A smart, as in he is one of those guys who will ace any test. But getting him out into the world was like taking him to a foreign country. We're on the plane, and he's looking out the window. He's just kind of like, wow. We landed in South Carolina. We got delayed. We got in late. We go into the convenience store, and, we're both starving to death. We don't want to spend $15 for an airport hamburger. Everything was closed anyway. So we find a convenience store in the city of our destination, and we go in there, and he picks up a couple of items, and he comes out. I'm waiting in the car. He comes out, and he's got this stunned look on his face. Stunned look on his face. Hey, man, what happened? He said, man, I got 2 items, and they totally added up to $5 exactly. And I had a $5 bill in my hand. Oh, well, that's interesting, huh? I mean, with tax, 2 items plus tax was $5. And I had a $5 bill. Yeah, I'll alert the media. Wow. I mean, you should have seen the kid. And everything we did was like that. Now, I've told the story before, so if you've heard it, forgive me and roll with it, okay? So we do the shoot, and he's a hardworking kid. He picks everything up. He's got natural talent, and again, he is head smart, book smart. And even though he's a minnow in the ocean, he just seems like he's got so much promise. So we're flying back, and there's weather, right? There's weather. And we get delayed. We're flying, I think, through, I'm going to say it was Houston or Dallas. We're delayed. We finally get on the first leg of our flight and land in our city of connection. And we are running through the airport. Hop on the tram, run down the concourse, up the escalator, run. And we get to our gate just in time to see the plane backing out. Last plane of the day. We're stuck. Crap. We're both exhausted. So we find a Holiday Inn or whatever, and we end up getting home the following day. I get a phone call from his mother. Little sweet, wispy, happy Jesus woman. Okay? You just picture it. Whatever picture is in your mind is this woman. Right? About 5'4", kind of fair skin, blonde hair, probably born in Texas. She just got that thing, Seth, I just wanted to call you, and apologize. Apologize? Yes, I felt terrible when I heard that you were delayed in Houston. You felt terrible? It was stormy. I mean, what'd you do? Well, I prayed, you see. I prayed for traveling mercies. When you and Sam were going to South Carolina on your trip, but I forgot to pray for traveling mercies for your return trip home. And when I heard that you got delayed, I felt just grieved in my spirit. Now, I'm still a believer at this point. I'm still a believer, right? I'm on the fence. I'm kind of doing my little dance. But I'm sitting there on the phone, and I must have had the same look on my face that Dave Silverman had when he was on the O'Reilly Factor. That look. What? What? God punished us because you didn't say the prayer of traveling mercies to get us home. We had to spend an extra night in the Holiday Inn in Houston, Texas. God works in mysterious ways. Now, I am thinking the whole time, this woman is as sweet as cherry pie or whatever. She's this huge-hearted, sweet, wonderful, good-natured, positive person who is from another planet. She thinks differently. She talks differently. She has this weird, bizarre, she lives in like the Christian version of Xanadu. She's, wow. I couldn't even relate. I must have just sat, I don't know how long I sat there with my mouth, my jaw on the floor. What? What? Oh, man. Now, she is at home with, I think it was 4 kids. And she is in charge of educating them about the world? Are you kidding me? world's going to eat them alive. They're going to go out into the real world, right? The world where mommy's not there every day to pull up in the minivan. Make sure she knows who they're with and what they're doing at all times. I want you back by sundown every day. Say your prayers. Here, let me cut your meat for you, honey. Right? They turn 18, and who knows where they go to college. Let's say they don't go to a Christian college. Well, let's say they do go to a Christian college, right? Which often are just as wild as anything else. They go out into the world. They're no longer sleeping in the little Brady Bunch bunk beds at home. They are now off in the world. And what happens? Well, I'm guessing it's like PK, the preacher's kid syndrome. They either remain on the straight and narrow, right? They curl up into a cocoon and find some other bubble people, and they all hang together and just live in a bubble together for 4 years till they graduate. or they take a little taste of the apple. You know what I'm saying? They go, whoa, wait a minute. There's a whole world out there, you know? Sam's got to be, 22, 23, maybe 22? You know, did he go off to college for the first time unsupervised? You know, did he go off there and look around in a college campus and go, girls, look, they're everywhere. Did he swing wildly the other way when someone offered him a drink? Did he say, absolutely not, it's against my religion? Or did he just dive into the deep end and say, oh yeah, I'm going crazy. I'm making up for lost time, people. And you know, that's the problem that I have. And I'm desperate for opinions other than mine. I'm desperate to see other perspectives because where I stand on it is from observing, right? Through the fish tank, I'm watching other people raise their children in a Christian home, it's a devoutly Christian homeschool, and it is there for their protection. I don't want them influenced by the world. I'm going to create a safe place, a safe environment that I can control, and I will then teach them what I want, and I will teach them my way, which in my mind causes a few problems. First of all, they are going to be eaten alive by the sharks in this world, right? They're going to be eaten alive. They're going to go out there with those wide eyes, right? Some of them don't even have a freaking television in their house. They don't even know what's going on in the world. They can't participate in everyday conversation. They're going to go out and just get swallowed whole. The second problem is, and I lean to you, those of you who are participants in homeschool, what qualifies a parent to be able to teach algebra to a child? I know a lot of great people, a lot of great parents. They're great parents. Are they qualified to teach history, trigonometry, the arts? A lot of it's done online, webinars, and there are whole programs done, right? I was homeschooled for a couple of months at the end of a really bad school year. It was my fourth grade year. I was in a private school. I'll get to the phone in just a second. I was in a private school called Temple Christian, right? And this school, talk about another planet, all right? Talk about another planet. We wore slacks every day, and we wore a tie on Wednesday because Wednesday was chapel day. We prayed before we didn't really have a class. It was called a pace program where you actually went at your own pace, which is one thing I do like about homeschooling, by the way. But this wasn't a homeschool. This is a private school. But my mom's there, and one of the teachers is not even college educated. She just happens to be related to somebody. Well, she's teaching children. Well, Mom said, you're out. So she takes us out, and she finishes us teaching us at home. I don't remember really anything about it. I don't remember anything about those couple of months that we spent homeschool, except it took us about 2 hours to finish what would have been a 7-hour school day. It was awesome. Went through everything, got it all done, made our section that we were supposed to get done that day. We made our goals. We had goals every day. Make the goal, make a good grade. We're outside in the sun, man. It was awesome. And that's the one thing that I do like about the idea of teaching children at their own pace. If you got them in a class of 30 people, are you being held back because we are playing to the one who is catching up? But what qualifies a parent? What qualifies a parent to be a child's teacher of whatever? I don't know. Maybe there are enough online resources. It's a highly polarized audience out there on this subject. I've told you what my experience has been. For what it's worth, I want to know what yours is. My first call is 337. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. This is David in South Louisiana.
David, I don't know what to do with this particular topic. I mean, I think homeschooling could be beneficial if you do it right, if you socialize your kids, but it just seems so easy to screw up. What's your perspective?
Well, I definitely agree with what you just said, in that it can be beneficial, but it's also incredibly easy to screw up. I was homeschooled from 7th grade through my senior year in high school. I was in public school from, pre-K up through 6th grade. And I was in a small town in southeast Texas at the time, and I think the only reason I was probably in public school to start with as opposed to private school is the only private school we had in town at the time was a Catholic school, and, well, damned if my parents were going to send me to a Catholic school, But, when it came down to it, the reason they gave for wanting to start homeschooling me, and I think this was probably 90% of the reason they actually did want to do it, had to do with academics. They said they thought they could do a better job than the school was doing, especially as we were getting higher up into, and they felt the school's academics were actually slipping. They felt they were compromising, the upper level programs for the sake of, like you said, taking more time to let the people at the bottom of the class catch up. And there's no question that you're absolutely right. You can, in a one-on-one school environment, and that's all it was for me. It was just me. I had 2 older siblings, but they both finished out in public school, so I was the only kid being schooled. It was my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, and she gave me 100% of her attention when it was time during the day to do school, because she had that luxury. She didn't have to work outside of the home. And so we could finish a whole day's worth of schoolwork, and really more than a whole day's worth of schoolwork, in a few hours instead of 7 or 8 hours. Now, part of the problem with that, looking back on it, is there's a difference in a whole day's worth of schoolwork when you're homeschooled and a whole day's worth of schoolwork in a public school, because you're losing a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's unnecessary, the travel to and from classes, the lunch break or whatever else. But a lot of it doesn't seem necessary at the time, but I think really does hold value for most kids. The socialization, the time spent, maybe not at recess as you get older, but certainly the PE courses that so many homeschool kids don't have any exposure to. And that's not just physical activity, although that's incredibly important, especially in a nation with an obesity problem like we have, but also the social skills that come from team sports and team activities and things like that. Most people, when they're homeschooled, don't get to learn to play an instrument in band. Maybe they have a private tutor, or maybe their parents know how to play an instrument. But if they're not that lucky, you're not going to have that experience. You're not going to get to do any of the group activities for the most part.
There is something that I know that some homeschoolers do in this part of the country. It's called Upwards. I guess it's like all these homeschool groups, these homeschoolers come together and they have organized, and they have then created sports teams and other activities to try to fill that gap. But right. I don't know how effective that is.
I think it's probably going to depend on the organization and the size of your community. A lot of these people who are doing this are in small towns. And I'm sure there are some in large cities too. But when you're in a tiny town, you may have a few homeschooled families. You're only going to be able to go so far with something like that.
Did you ever segue into public school?
No, I didn't go back into public school. I finished up basically what we were considering the end of my high school curriculum. I was 17 years old.
Okay, so at 17, homeschool, and I don't want you to take this wrong. I mean, I'm saying it half in jest, but I mean, were you kind of like a pod person? You know what I'm saying? You're freaking 17 years old. Were you a bubble person? Were you isolated? Were you wide-eyed and completely insulated from the realities of everything, or what?
not nearly to the extent that I could have been. And I think a lot of that, and you've talked about this before on your show, I know, a lot of that has to do with the internet. You know, the internet was really first starting to come into its own around this same time. You know, I had a PC in my room and a pretty solid internet connection. This is back in the days of America Online. You know, remember what that was like, paying by the minute and all that.
CompuServe. Yeah, I remember those days.
I honestly think, and I know a lot of homeschool children don't have this, and that's part of the problem, but if you have an open internet connection and access to that, it puts so much knowledge about the world at your fingertips. It's still not the same as real-world experience. There's no substitute for that. But it exposes you to aspects of the world, to current affairs, to all these issues that are out there that, you know, a homeschool parent is probably not going to sit you down and talk about. And so there was that. And I knew quite a few people. You know, I had some dating experiences online. You remember how that was when you're a horny teenager?
I have no comment on that, David.
But so I met a few older people, which of course that opens up some experiences.
Well, wait a minute. How does dating work when you're homeschooled? I mean, you're not exactly in a target-rich environment, so
no, that's true. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work terribly well. I did have a girlfriend in our homeschool group. We had a small local homeschool group, and my first girlfriend was in that group. And so there was a little bit of socialization in that side of things. You know, once you're 16 and have a driver's license and have access to a car, if you know at least a few people, you have the opportunity, assuming your parents allow it, to get out of the house and go do some of that. And my parents did allow that. I was very fortunate that they were not nearly as controlling and strict as I think the average homeschooling parent is. And that's something I'm really glad of, because it could have been, and I knew kids who had it the other way around. I knew these kids, like you were talking about earlier, who it's them and their 6 siblings, you know, in the house with mom teaching them school, which is 3/4 the Bible and 1/4 everything else. And
so,
you see them and then...
I'm not crazy. I mean, you have seen those examples.
Oh, the vast majority... The vast majority of the homeschooled kids I have ever met, both the ones I met when I was homeschooled and then the few that I met who had also been homeschooled once I went off to college, you know, I met some fellow homeschooled kids. Most of them were nowhere near as fortunate as I was as far as the level of experience. And a lot of that, honestly, I think comes from the fact that most of them had been homeschooled their whole lives. You know, I was in public school through 6th grade, and that doesn't sound like a lot.
No, it does. It does.
But that early socialization is crucial when it comes to learning to deal with other people, even other people you don't especially get along with, being exposed to other viewpoints, some other cultures. And it also helped that my parents traveled a lot and took me with them as much as possible. So I had seen other parts of the world. I had seen other countries. I'd seen a lot of the different states and different cultures that are there. So at least I'd had some exposure.
Well, we're going to move from here in a few moments from religious homeschooling, which is a whole other animal. But I am convinced it is an environment designed to make young people head smart, life stupid. Because
well, I think that's correct.
They can pass a test with flying colors. They can recite book knowledge. They may have cultivated, their intellect or what have you, and you put them out in a real world situation, and it's like a kitten by the interstate. They are helpless to figure out what to do next.
That's absolutely true. And, you know, I was fortunate that my parents didn't use strong Christian curriculums for everything, although certainly for some subjects they did. My history, my American history especially, was all about God's plan for the country and, you know, his guiding hand bringing us to where we were.
Founding fathers were all Christians, and it was God and country. Real fast, before I move on, would you
Sure.
Would you consider ever homeschooling your children or no?
I would consider it, but it wouldn't be a first choice. I would only consider it if there wasn't a good school option where I was. And honestly, it's so much responsibility for one person to take on. You're already doing so much as a parent to shape this person's life. I think it's too much to have you be their sole influence. I think public schools were created initially not really to educate, but to make the children informed citizens of the country, to make them able to understand public topics, to be voting people, to be able to hold public discourse. And when you take that away, I just think you're doing a disservice, not just to your child, but to the country as a whole, if you don't do it really, really carefully.
Yeah. David, thanks for a great call and your perspective. Much appreciated, sir. Take care of yourself.
Thanks for taking it.
You bet.
Right, bye.
That's another angle that off the top of my head, I thought, yeah, if you homeschool as a parent, you don't get the opportunity for 9 months to every morning go, bye. See you at 3:00. Being a parent being hard enough. Now you're a teacher. That's crazy. I had an email from Sally. She said, we homeschooled our son from 7th through 11th grade during the time we were fundamentalist Christians. We began doing so mainly because of bullying in the Christian school he attended. I have mixed feelings about it now. We deconverted after Nathan was grown. And then Sally lists pros and cons, and I'm just going to read them to you because I thought they were well written. The pros are, if done right, and that's a big if, takes a lot of work on the part of the teaching parent. If done right, it provides a lot of extra time for the child to explore the world. School wastes a lot of time. Agreed. Parents very reasonably worry about their children's safety in school these days, and homeschooling ends those worries. It's quite easy to let a child pursue his favorite topics in depth. Our son was very musical, for example, and spent many hours practicing both piano and guitar and writing music. Had he been in school, he would have never made the progress that he did. Homeschooled children tend to be far less age-sensitive or age-segregated. Homeschooled teens don't mind socializing with children far younger than they are, nor are they intimidated by adults. Homeschoolers can take advantage of life events as teaching moments far easier than can be done in a classroom. For example, the guy came to tune the piano. We stopped school and Nathan got to watch him do the tuning. The piano tuner was quite obviously delighted. Same thing was with a visit to the eye doctor. I explained he was homeschooled and the eye doctor gave him an entire lesson in eye anatomy on the spot, real world stuff. There was a lunar eclipse. So we took naps in the afternoon and stayed up way into the night watching the sky. The cons. She says, life is not always fair. Some employers suck. Some fellow employees suck too. Homeschooled kids have a tendency to live in a fair world because mom loves them and tries very hard to be fair. It's just very easy to excuse stuff that will not be excused in the real world. For example, in the real world, a paper is due on Friday. If life intervenes and Billy doesn't get the paper written and turned in on time, he gets marked down. In a homeschooling situation, it's too easy to excuse Billy because the parent knows that his aunt and uncle came to dinner on Tuesday and he had a doctor's appointment on Wednesday, etc. These were all good reasons, quote unquote, good reasons why the paper wasn't done, so the time gets extended. She says it's very easy to indoctrinate a child with your own ideas, obviously. Religious people who homeschool do so for exactly this reason. Freethinkers have to be very careful to purposefully incorporate all viewpoints, not just their own. A lot of homeschool materials are Christian and conservative. Probably the majority of that stuff is. Isolation can be a problem depending on the child and the situation. Our son decided he wanted to go back to a real school for the 12th grade. It was a real challenge getting him in public school. One turned him down completely. The second required him to be tested in every subject for 9th through 11th grades. He did fine before granting him credit. Some children just shouldn't be homeschooled. A parent, to be effective, needs to be open to that idea that their child may actually need the outside authority figure and the social interaction. Our son wanted to go to school because he wanted to participate in extracurricular activities. Other children are happier homeschooled. It takes a perceptive parent to observe the signs of trouble and adjust without getting their hearts set on homeschooling is the answer to everything. Homeschooling done right can be relatively expensive. It can also be affordable, but it takes a lot of creativity, dedication, and work to cut costs. Plopping a child in front of the TV for, quote, classes is not the answer, although I know a lot of parents who do just that. She finishes her email. Homeschooling was the right choice for us at the time. However, I'm not so sure that we'd have ever had to resort to it had we enrolled our son in a good public school right from the start. Our homeschooling was totally an effort to patch up problems that occurred entirely as a result of having him in a Christian school. Sally, thank you so much for a great letter. I guess bullying happens in schools of all shapes and sizes, and every situation is certainly unique. Back to the phones, 816. You are on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
My name is Holly, and I actually live in the Midwest as well. I was homeschooled by my mother from the age of 3 until I graduated. I guess that's what you can call it. I have had a bad experience and a horrible life after being homeschooled.
They started you at 3?
Oh, I was reading second grade material by the age of 3.
So you were, as far as the book work is concerned, advanced, right? You were probably above everybody in your age group.
Yes.
And what made it so horrible? What happened?
Well, the one bad thing, and nobody brings it up, is when you're around your parents all the time and there's no outside influence whatsoever, there's nobody that sees the kids, it's easy to hide bruises. And no one thinks about that. And that does happen. And it's very common in homeschooling life. You're around your kids constantly. And, you can snap. And my mother did quite often. And it's something that I'm still dealing with even at the age of almost 30. I never learned anything. I think probably the most I've learned is from the age of 18 and being kicked out of my parents' house on through being almost 30. I don't think the education that my mother was providing me was adequate, so I would actually go behind her back at the library and research subjects that I wanted to research.
If I may, I want to go back for just a second. Are you, from your perspective, are you saying that homeschool parents who may abuse their children homeschool them to hide the fact that they abuse the kids, or do you believe that the abuse is a byproduct of the fact that they spend all day, every day in the same space?
Well, it's all about control, and control in itself is abuse. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that. The fact that my mom didn't know how to cope with her own life, and so that was passed on to all of us kids. My sister, I haven't screwed up as much as some of my siblings have. We'll just say that. But it is very damaging when you're secluded from society. No one knows what's going on. No one has a clue. Because I didn't even get all of my immunizations because I wasn't in public school. Doing that, I never learned sports. There's a lot that you're lacking as a homeschooler. Did
you compensate when you finally were out on your own then? Where were you at? Were you a minnow, or had you done enough on your own that you had sort of developed the social skills to cope?
Well, I have always been an outgoing person, but it has stunted my ability to deal with people in the real world. Once I got out of my parents' house, it was like a week after I turned 18. So you're sitting at home all these years, and you work for your parents, day in, day out, and that's essentially, we delivered papers every night. So 365 days a year, we were made to go and help and work and then come home, do our schoolwork. So I had the experience of working, and I'm a very hard worker, but it's hard for me to shut my mouth sometimes at work. It's come into play a few times in my life.
Did she keep you home because she believed it was the best move for you, or was there another motive?
Everything was the devil. My mother has told me, you don't need to do it because I've already done it, and I know what's out there, and I know what's good for you. So you are not allowed to have friends. You're not allowed to have friends over. You're not allowed to go to a friend's house. You're not allowed to go to a concert at the age of 16. You're not allowed to do anything. You know, I mean, there was a few years where we didn't leave the house unless it was to go to the store. Like, we were not even allowed to play in the backyard.
You know, there are people in certain parts of the world, and even parts of the United States right now, who are hearing you talk, who wonder if they've just gone into the Twilight Zone. I mean,
I know.
It's unbelievable to them, and yet we do see it. They believe they are doing their children a favor, and instead they are hamstringing them, right? They are limiting their ability to interact socially with the real world, which is often a complex and very difficult world, certainly not a fair world. Would you homeschool a child outside of the religious umbrella? Let's say there was no religion, there was no devil, there was none of that stuff, but it was just about the academics.
Absolutely, because the religious aspect of it is everything is bad, everything's a sin, everyone is bad. You know, you should be afraid of everything. You know, I'm a newly converted atheist. You know, one day it just kind of clicked. You know, my dad had told me, you're going to hell because you're not Catholic. And then my mom tells me, you know, you're going to hell because you're not a Christian, because my dad's Catholic, my mom's Christian. But they were never married or anything. So it's the fear aspect. And as an adult, you know, I had to work shitty-ass jobs because I don't have, you know, my mom never told us to go get a GED after we were done, because we never reported to the state. We didn't have to, because in the state of Missouri, you don't have to. So, you know, that had really stunted me as well.
But
so
you would do it.
Hard, you know, I think so. If I taught, if I had kids and I taught them science the way that science is supposed to be taught, and let my kids decide, absolutely.
Well, after hearing your story, you know, it kind of saddens me to hear that you just didn't have a great start. And I will encourage you that I, like you, am a little late to the free thought party. But we finally did arrive, you and me. We finally showed up. You know, it took me a lot of years, just like it took you a lot of years. But there's just no feeling like not having to fear the invisible eye in the sky, and not having to make the square peg fit into the round hole, and to not be afraid to ask questions. And I don't know. My hope for you is a wonderful, happy, fulfilled, rich life.
I'm working on it. I'm actually a member of the Midwest Skeptics Society. I go to the meetings quite often, and I am beginning to try and get into the atheist community in my area. Well,
welcome. You know, of course, the Thinking Atheist community is good for support. Our people are awesome. You know, they're awesome. Trust me, I use them and abuse them every time I'm in a low place. I feel, I can't take it. I log on, I enter the forum, I feed off of these people. They're a great support mechanism. I appreciate your perspective, and I'm so glad you called. You take care, okay?
All right, thanks, Beth.
Thank you. I have to say it out loud. Conservative and Republican are not the same thing. I just had to say it. I had an email from Chris from Texas. He said, we homeschool our kids. The decision was one based on both the quality of education and what we felt like the environment was at the time. We also enjoy spending time with our kids. Also, both of my children have had long-term health issues that would have presented greater challenges in a public school setting. Here are a few of my thoughts. Chris says, the most common question is, what about socialization? This is a non-issue. My children have very busy social lives, and last year took it upon themselves to help organize a homeschool prom. Educationally, we've done a lot of things extremely well, but have also made a few mistakes about which I constantly fret. My oldest is college-bound this fall. I can't wait to see what the future holds for my youngest. And it's a lot of work. What I'm happiest about is how they've turned out as people. They're constantly involved in service projects and always impress the people they work with in professional environments. My feeling is that while they did grow up with a lot of friends, they were mostly raised by adults and not other kids. I have to admit, the thought of a religious fundamentalist homeschooling their kids in order to teach the Bible as history does bother me on some level. I'll bet every level. However, the thought of the government telling me what we would have to teach them makes me want to say it's none of your damn business. I think this has to be a matter of choice. Christy said, as an atheist homeschooling parent, I believe secular homeschoolers may one day be the saviors of the homeschooling community. The antidote to sheltering hyper-religious parents who cripple their children with false information, like the world is 6,000 years old and fossils exist because God likes to play an elaborate game with the minds of dirty, free-thinking skeptics. Fundamentalists homeschool to keep their offspring from the world, but we secular homeschoolers do it to teach them the truth. And so they don't have to relearn everything from grade school in college, but differently. For example, Christopher Columbus didn't discover America and sit down at the table of brotherhood with the smiling Indians. Do it the right way the first time. Thanks, Christy, for the letter. You know, I look back at how simplistic so many of our lessons were growing up, and it was just like the Christopher Columbus story. What did they teach us about George Washington? Did we know anything about whether or not he was a religious man or whether or not he was a slave owner? What he was like? What were the nuances of George Washington's life? Right? He was the first president. His face is on the money, and he chopped down the cherry tree and he cannot tell a lie. This is the kind of crap they taught us. These little tiny bumper sticker cookie cutter fairy tales. You know, did it happen? I don't know. But is that what we really had to teach about George Washington? I cannot tell a lie. I chopped it down. That's right. You know, he had to be bigger than life. He had to be kind of like the superhero, you know, the Boy Scout. He had to be this saccharine, sweet, kind of something they could spoon feed to children, and that's all we really knew. I didn't know anything about the founding fathers. Not really. Not until I started to do a little homework. Not until people started to tell me that we were a Christian nation and I decided to go check for myself. That was an eye-opening experience. Christopher Hitchens was the first one who planted that seed. Talking about Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, John Adams. Really? Wait a minute. I'd never heard that before. I went and did some digging. It's amazing what just a little research will turn up, folks. I was sitting there with my mouth on the ground going, really? Really? And then I made a note for all the other people who post on my Facebook page that we are a Christian nation. Bam. 303, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. This is Al from Denver. How are you?
Glad you're calling, Al. What's going on, man?
Well, I just like to provide a little bit of my own perspective. I've been studying psychology for about 10 years, so I care pretty deeply about the subject of child development. My mother just retired as a second grade teacher in a really beautiful public school for about 35 years, I think, was her track record. And I'm also dating a girl who she and her three younger sisters were homeschooled for I guess about the last 20 years underneath their mom. So
does she have that like invasion of the body snatchers look on her face everywhere she goes? I'm just asking, you know.
It's a good question. It's funny. We've been dating for about a year. We met in college. I know that, they say statistically college is kind of one of the bigger things that sort of deprograms people from that homeschool heavily religious upbringing. So I know that they definitely lit the spark for her, but we definitely had a really sort of, lengthy friendship that evolved sort of tiptoeing around just to what degree she felt like she was coming out of this really secluded world and being a part of, a bigger social scene.
Well, describe the world for me. I mean, were they really strict? Were they allowed to date? Did they have a freaking television in their house? Did they go to the movies? Were they restricted in social aspects? I mean, what was it like for her?
It's a good question. I can tell you that she wasn't allowed to see anything movie-wise, anything be on PG-13 until she was 18. So a lot of our relationship has been a catch up on films like, Armageddon or Jurassic Park, or things that involve science, things that involve stuff that would be interesting, stuff that makes you think, things like The Truman Show even, or things like just any media that's going to make you as a human being think existentially, question the world you belong in, question reality a little bit. So that she never had. She definitely didn't have any kind of a scientific upbringing. She had no idea about the age of the Earth. She had no idea about the origin of the Earth or the Moon, or how different faculties of nature work. I think her mathematics skills were probably lacking a bit, and I just had to assume, because I can't remember off the top of my head, that that's really where her religious schooling.
Did I just lose him? Chat room.
I'm sorry, you still there?
Oh, there you are. You cut out.
Hey,
I caught the religious influence, and then I lost you. So it was a heavily religious environment, correct?
Yeah, it was an environment of really heavy ideology. It wasn't just a Christian ideology. It was a really political ideology. It was that it's a government's bad. It's that, schools are corrupt. Schools are dangerous. It's a lot of, I think, sort of stranger danger ideology, and really just it's about control, like the previous caller said, I think. But to a degree, I think where you would point out it hamstrung her a little bit. I mean, she's an amazing girl. She's really capable. She's headstrong, head smart, like you'd say. But she had nothing like the upbringing I did, which was a secular one, in really great public schools, which was seeing. I mean, when we talk about socialization, we're not just talking about being with other people. We're talking about being exposed to diversity. We're talking about seeing other religions, other practices, other ways of thinking, and the way in which seeing that spectrum develops us as human beings and how that can be healthy. And that's what she didn't have. Until she got to college, I think. She'd never had that, and that affected her in a big way. Well,
I think I look at, I always refer to that time that Christopher Hitchens, I'm not invoking him because I'm stuck on Hitch today, but it just happened to be the examples that came to mind. But it was that time he was on Sean Hannity, and he said to him, I hate to say this, but you give me the impression of someone who has never read any of the arguments against your position ever. And I think when I grew up, I had never heard any legitimate arguments against my position. How do you sharpen your own worldview if it's never challenged or tested? And so I totally get that. So you guys, you go out to dinner and you're having a conversation and you look her in the eye and say, honey, 13.7 billion years ago. I mean, how, certainly she heard all this talk about evolution, the Big Bang. We have a common ancestor, blah, 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 coming out of your mouth. If she came from a religious background, did she blanch at all? What was her reaction?
Her reaction, I think, has been one of the most beautiful things of our whole relationship, because it was such a, I mean, when you are isolated in that kind of an upbringing, I mean, for her, it was, life is very simple. I know where my place is in the family and in life as a woman. I know what my capabilities are because these are what's expected of me. And I know that when this is over, I'm just going to go to heaven. So for most of her life, it was this depressing sort of waiting for the next phase. And when she made that transition to actually wanting to learn about the world and learn about science and learn about 13.7 billion years, it changed her whole attitude about life, because for the first time she got it in her head that life is really beautiful and precious, and it's not just this waiting for the next step. It's something that's rare and amazing. And so from that point on, it was easy. It was, okay, let's check out the Discovery Channel. Let's check out TED Talks. Let's do this thing. And she eats it up. It's all we do. I mean, she feels like she's been freed.
It's almost like the starving man giving something to eat after all this time. It is. She's just drinking in information, sponging it up as quickly as she can. That's exciting, because I have a feeling, and I don't know, but if I was to run into Sam, my homeschool buddy, and I was to tell him that I believed that 13.7 years ago, a singularity took place and that I don't buy the biblical creation story and we all have a common ancestor and blah, 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 he would burst into flames. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He would shut down. He would not be sending, he would not be receiving. He would only be sending. You know, they start him off with the answer, right? And then they go out and tell them to find the facts that buttress their already established point of view. Well, I wish you and her the very best. You drop me an email in a few months. Let me know how it's going, okay? I mean, I'm not a relationship counselor, but I'm kind of excited for you two. Her story is compelling.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need one, you know. And I think, again, I mean, she's a smart, capable girl. I don't think there's an easy answer to homeschooling if it's good or bad. I think, you know, you have good teachers, you have bad teachers. I think the bigger issue is it's good to give individual attention to students, no doubt about it. But at what degree are we hamstringing them by either pumping them full of our own agendas or limiting them from things and dangers that are not real? So anyway, we keep fighting the good fight. Thanks a lot for letting me come on.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Great point, too. Are we raising children or are we creating clones? Too often it is clones. I had an email from Olivia. She said, I think unless the mother or father has at least a master's in childhood education, science, math, English, and maybe a foreign language, education should be left to teachers. Karen said, homeschooled children also across the board score significantly higher in all subjects on national standardized tests, and they tend to score higher than the national average on the ACTs and SATs. Studies and statistics show that the education level of the teaching parent has no significant bearing on the success of the homeschooled student. Thanks, Karen. Trevor said, I think homeschooling is very bad for kids. I think in order to have any kind of real wisdom about the world we live in, children should be exposed to as many influences as possible and be given the opportunity to analyze and understand all perspectives and all angles of life and be able to ask questions and receive answers from different sources. They may not understand other people's lifestyles as children, but if they've been exposed to them at an early age, then by the time they graduate and move out into the world on their own, they will be well prepared for what the real world has to offer. If they only start seeing the bad side of the world once they've grown up, then they still have many years of learning to do and will be incapable of functioning in society until they are approaching middle age. Trevor, thanks for the message. Let's see, 918, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, this is Manfred, the Cranky Saint.
What's going on, Manfred? Good to hear your voice, brother.
Oh, well, I've been, listening to the show, and I haven't heard any teachers call in, so I thought I'd give my 2 cents on the subject.
As an instructor, please tell me what your perspective is, sir.
Well, some of these areas have been touched on by your previous callers, and I won't go too deep into what they were doing. But there are advantages to homeschooling that are contributing to those higher scores. And that biggest advantage is that individualized attention. When you've got a room full of 30 students, some of them are going to fall through the cracks. And if you're at the high school level like I am, and you don't have 30 students, you've got 180, 200 students to deal with over the course of the day. So that individualized attention is a big factor there. And this could be done at the public school setting if we had support from school boards. Unfortunately, a lot of school boards around here are staffed by people who have absolutely no education background, but they're making decisions that affect child's education. Most infamously, one of our local school boards here in Cal Central had 2 members who were high school dropouts. They were in it because their grandkids were in the schools. That was it. So, the advantage of the homeschooling, that individual attention, that attention to the child's individual learning style, that's where that comes in. That's where they're getting those higher scores. We can get that in the high schools and in the elementary schools if school boards would let us do these things. But they're all about the money. But the biggest disadvantage, and a couple of your callers have touched on this one, was the fact that a lot of these parents have no qualifications for teaching this stuff. And just getting past their own biases, put their own bias aside, these are people who wouldn't know Bloom's taxonomy if it jumped up and bit them in the ass, and they couldn't spell pedagogy if their life depended on it. So how are they getting this information across their students if they don't know anything about teaching?
If you had to give me the benefits and challenges in a nutshell of teaching in a public school, you're a high school teacher.
Yes.
You are obviously probably up to your freaking eyeballs in bureaucracy, right? You probably have so much more you would like to do, but you are handcuffed, right? I mean, is that close?
Yes, most definitely.
Well, come on, vent. What are your frustrations about the public school system?
The biggest frustration, again, comes out of the school boards, who pretty much decide everything, and yet they have no education background for the most part. So they're making these decisions that affect us down in the classroom, us down in the trenches. Let's see, what was one of the more recent ones? In the district where I teach, they had changed the eligibility program for extracurricular activities, especially athletics. It used to be if you had if you had a D in any of your classes, you couldn't play at all until you brought it up. This year they changed that. Now, if you got a D and you go sit with a tutor for an hour, you can go play. It wasn't bringing up the scores. It was getting the kids out there on the field. And that was putting extra load on the teachers with no further compensation for our time. And the kids were just sitting there staring off into space. They were looking at the clock. Okay, my time is done. I'm out the door to the practice field.
All right, so would homeschooling have solved any of the major problems that you see in the public school?
The biggest problem that the biggest thing that homeschooling does is, as I was addressing that, the individualized attention, individual learning styles. This is something that I've studied at some extent. In fact, I'm working on my master's degree program right now, and I'm studying about individual learning styles. There are factors that affect how you learn. Some people learn better under bright lighting, some dim lighting. Temperature changes, time of day, working in groups, working alone. Well, if you've got 30 to 40 kids crammed into one room, sitting in neat little rows in these hard desks, not all of them are going to be able to learn under those conditions. If the school boards would pay attention to the educators, they would allow us to make the modifications to our classrooms and provide the funding that we need in these classrooms to make the necessary changes. Give a little section off to the side of the room for the students who work better alone, a little section over here for students who work better in groups. Maybe give us some control over the lighting. That's actually something I'm hoping to incorporate next year in my classroom. They're moving me to a bigger classroom next year, assuming I have a job. And I'll be working on setting up little individual areas, make my room a model for learning styles. But they are busy looking at the money.
Well, you're probably also running into, I mean, if you were to take, let's say, the 5 fastest learners, the 5 most advanced students, and you put them in their own little pod, now you're talking politics, right? Because all of the parents of the other children are going, "What's wrong with little Timmy? You think he's stupid?"
Well, that comes into one of the other areas that has been I have trouble coming to a decision on my opinion on one thing, and that's called inclusion. Inclusion is when they bring in students with learning disabilities into the regular classroom. And what am I trying to say here? And
I think
the
I
teacher
understand.
has to adapt the lesson to them.
Right.
Now, we are legally obligated to do that, but some of these children have, I don't know if they're getting any advantage, if they're getting some positive exposure by being mainstream with the other students, but I'm wondering if it's worth the costs of bringing them into the classroom.
So they want them to be given the same environment that everyone else does. So
yes.
In the name of equality, they are brought into an environment that may not be suited to their particular disability. So it's kind of a catch-22
exactly.
for you as the teacher, isn't it?
Yes. So I am having to, come up with, especially in one of my classes, almost half the students in one of my classes on some kind of individual education plan. So I'm having to come up with 5, 6, 7 different versions of everything that we do in the classroom. And then I'm expected to keep things organized on a nice, neat calendar so that everybody finishes up at the same time. We can move on to the next project. It doesn't work that way.
I have to try to get a few more in, but before I move on, I have 2 things. First of all, teachers to me it's like cops. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they are probably among the least appreciated people, and it's cliche to say that, but you're not just an instructor. You're a counselor. You're a policeman. You are all of these things at the same time. You're a politician. You're balancing the opinions of every parent and their dog on the planet. So just between you and me, I got to ask you a question. You're teaching high school. You're teaching high school. One of these little hormone-charged teenagers walks up and gives you some attitude. Do you ever just fantasize about just waylaying on him? Don't answer it. Don't answer it. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to get you in trouble.
I do have a reputation around the school for being a bit of a brick wall, though. They have learned not to cross me, that I have no compunction to make them cry.
Aren't you military?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I have gone into drill sergeant mode numerous times over the last couple of years.
No homework today. You get on your face and give me 25 right now. Manfred, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. Take care of yourself, okay?
All right.
Great to hear the perspective of a teacher. Thanks so much, Manfred. He's called into the show many times, and he's always got a lot to offer. Lisa said she's got 2 homeschooled kids. Please keep in mind, she says, as you look at the stereotype of religious homeschoolers who keep their children in a bubble, that the children of my right-wing Christian neighbors, all of whom attend the local public schools, all believe in creationism and couldn't be more homogenous in terms of religious beliefs and lifestyle. Contrast this to our local networks of secular homeschoolers with whom we have park days, parents' night out, co-op learning, book, art, and science clubs, field trips, teen group activities, etc. None of them deny evolution, even the religious ones. There are multiple lesbian couples raising families, a variety of faiths represented, several atheist parents, no peer pressure to do drugs or dress or think a certain way, no ageism, adults are not feared, younger children are not ostracized. Bullying is not tolerated by the parents or the children. My parents' exposure to ideas of learning, peers, families, and religious beliefs is significantly more diverse than those of my neighbors, and thank goodness. By the way, people who get worked up about homeschoolers also seem to forget about the private schools, which are allowed to actively teach creationism and exclude attendance by those of differing beliefs, some actively, some passively. We have a local evangelical school which advertises that they, quote, teach godly children, unquote, for example. I find I don't hear people writing articles, hosting podcasts, or making offhand comments about these children in schools like they do about homeschoolers, yet I'm certain there are a significant number of students in these schools. Just something to think about. It's important to me that homeschoolers don't get viewed as being the problem. When you can look at the statistics of adults in this country who have religious beliefs and educational ignorance. How many don't understand even the basics of evolution, for example, who think that science of global warming is a conspiracy, who went all the way through our public school system. Religious beliefs are persistent, and that's a big deal. For example, the idea of the educated in this country being elitists is a pervasive one at the moment, as is the general anti-science sentiment. These are large cultural problems, and given they continue while the vast majority of people are educated in the public school system, I think spending energy on the minority who homeschool for religious reasons is a distraction that may feel satisfying to some, but ultimately isn't going to change anything. A cultural shift would make all the difference and is, in my opinion, the only thing that truly can. How to bring that about? It's a very good question. Thanks for your attention, Lisa. Lisa, thank you for the letter. Back to the phones quickly. 440, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hello, Seth. This is Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, glad you called. Thanks for waiting an hour on the switchboard. Real fast, what do you have for me?
Hey, I was homeschooled. First off, I met you at the Reason Rally. It was good to meet you.
You too, man. I'm glad you came out. Had a great time. You seem pretty balanced. You're not all that screwed up, are you?
Well, I don't know.
Come on.
They've been talking about it, some of the callers, the lack of science education and stuff like that. I never learned about evolution, cosmology, all that sort of stuff until I was an adult, essentially. So, the idea that they control basically all of your education, and it's all got to be God-based and Bible-based and all that stuff.
So you got out, and what happened? Did you swing hard the other way? Did you go wild? What happened when you finally became an adult?
I guess I've always kind of been a doubter, and so I've slowly been coming out, I suppose, over time. But after I read The God Delusion, he talks about a lot of stuff in there that I was like, wait a minute, evolution? Where's the evidence for this? So I had to go and find the evidence and educate myself, essentially. So, here's the funny thing is, too, the last time I'd been to D.C., I was there for the Rally for Life. My parents were very pro-life, fundamentalist.
So you did the Rally for Life, and then you went back for the Reason Rally.
There you go. But you always talk about, too, the Christian radio. We only were allowed to listen to Christian radio. So when you talk about Michael W. Smith and all that, I grew up on all that stuff, too.
Me too. Me too. It was their way of protecting us from the evils of worldly music, secular music, devil music, and
right. That was the other controlling things we were allowed to read. I wasn't allowed to read Isaac Asimov because he was a humanist. Things like that. Which at the time, I'm 13 years old. I'm like, what's that? This is just an interesting science fiction story, to me. So
I appreciate your perspective. I'm glad to meet a fellow free thinker who came out of homeschool, a religious homeschool, and found a path of his own. That's good stuff. Thank you so much.
All right, good to talk to you.
Take care of yourself. 719, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Thanks for waiting. Who's this?
Hey, Seth, this is Adam out in Colorado Springs.
Glad you're calling, Adam. I'm going out to Colorado. I think it's Denver, the Labor Day weekend. There's a big secular event going on. I'm still getting details on, so I'm looking forward to heading your direction. What's your perspective on all this?
I got a kind of a different twist on it that hasn't really been brought up. I'm in the Army. I was a recruiter for over 4 years. And working with kids coming out of high school, we keep talking about, the children that are in school and everything. No one's really brought up what you do when you leave career and secondary education. And I don't think people realize that homeschool actually presents a lot of challenges that I don't think parents who researched it know are there. Like enlisting in the Army, you're automatically considered a different tier category for education, which can limit further education benefits and bonuses and stuff like that, as opposed to someone who was schooled in a public school. And it goes state by state, but also colleges have different, regulations on homeschoolers, because not all homeschool is regulated as far as, who's printing the diploma, who's in control of the curriculums. So it presents a whole nother challenge for when they're actually ready to go out into the world.
So whether it's a religious homeschool or a secular homeschool, you're saying that in many environments they will be flagged in some way, in ways that might limit them?
Yes, I mean, of course, you go to, not all colleges do discriminate against it, and some do. The military, obviously, if the benefits are open for that tier group, then it doesn't matter. But interesting enough, in the regulation, they're considered, no matter their GPA, the same evaluated education as someone with a GED. So yeah, it could be a whole nother hurdle that they're not even expecting.
So it's something, if you did choose to homeschool, you would definitely you'd probably want to run the traps and find out exactly what those challenges would be. At least you'd be prepared for them when the child becomes 18. And do homeschoolers graduate? Do they have like a graduation ceremony of some kind? I wonder.
The ones I've worked with, they get their diplomas sent to them or manufactured through the same people that do it for other high schools and stuff. But I mean, I don't know many that are in large groups. The ones I've worked with to join the Army and stuff, they're all out of their house. But I just wanted to bring that up for all the people saying higher test scores and public education isn't as good. That's all well and fine when you get your GPA, but then when you move on to secondary education or want to do something as simple as like I want to serve my country for a few years, it can extremely hinder you.
Well, I appreciate the service to our country as well. Thank you for which branch are you in?
The Army.
Army, wonderful. Well, I appreciate the call and your perspective. It's an opinion we haven't heard yet, but it's great to hear from you. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Seth.
Somebody on my chat room who knows, would you tell me if, I'm guessing these homeschool associations must do a graduation ceremony. I can't imagine they would deprive the child of the chance to do the cap and gown and the diploma, right? And see, all the kids I know are still... Sam, the kid I was talking about, they moved away, so I have no idea where he's at. But the ones I know who are currently in homeschool, they're, when are they, 12 and 13? So, I mean, I don't know. And if they do a graduation ceremony and there's just one person, that's pretty short, right? Da, 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 da. Thanks for coming out. That's it. I'm guessing they've got to have some kind of there's got to be some organization. Somebody in my chat room, can you help me out here? Back to the phones. 518, you're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. Who's this?
Hey, Seth. This is Andrew from New York. I'm a bit torn on homeschooling. I can go either way. The college I went to focuses on pedagogy, which is instructing people how to teach effectively. And I was actually looking to be a secondary education instructor focusing on math. And who's to say, these parents are equipped to teach to the needs of their kids. The one caller you had a valid point that these people aren't regulated. They don't possess a master's degree in education.
Yeah, well, think about this, though. I mean, look, there are a hell of a lot of public schools that are barely worth the electric bill that they pay to open up in the morning. They probably, people slide through the cracks left and right. They have a pretty low pool of educators. Who knows how many people are in there resting on their tenure? Who knows what the tone is being set by the superintendent or the dean or whatever they are. I mean, I think isn't every situation going to be very specific, very different, and everything has to be sort of sized up case by case? Because there are a lot of public people I know who graduated from public school. They are functionally illiterate. They can't spell. They can barely read. Right? They are really inhibited in most of the basics of high school education. So it's not, I mean, I don't know. I see both sides of it. I'm not trying to be a politician about it, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. What do you think?
I agree. And that's where I'm torn because going into school, there are these instructors that I had that are brilliant people. They know their stuff in their subject area, but they don't teach it effectively. And they've got a PhD, so it is very different. And that's where I'm torn with the whole thing. Because you could have somebody who's a very effective teacher, but they don't necessarily have the qualifications. But that's not to say that they don't teach the kids effectively. But then you could have somebody who has the qualifications, but then they're crap at teaching. So it can go both ways.
You hit on something it's something that I'm thinking about covering in another capacity at Free OK, but I'm doing some presentations here in the spring. We're talking about communication. What good is a good message if you cannot communicate it effectively? I took history, obviously, all through school, right? We all did. History, right? American history and world history and history. I never engaged. Usually my history teacher was the gym teacher, and the gym teacher was required to teach one other subject, right? So it was history or something, or science. And when I was a senior in high school, her name was Mrs. Bridges, and she was this well-versed, smart, funny storyteller who, for the first time, brought history to life. I mean, she told us the stories, and she made it come alive, and she made me care, and she helped me to understand why it is important and relevant. And I had people who, there were people teaching at the college level who have PhDs and degrees out the yin-yang, who are book smart, who have all the knowledge, who are shitty communicators. They are lousy at instructing and inspiring and educating other people. And I'm so glad you brought that point up. The best teachers are not the ones necessarily who just have the head knowledge, but who can compel and translate and get people excited about learning, to teach, not just to know. That's good stuff. Anything else?
No, that's all I really wanted to bring up, and
good stuff, man.
Glad to be on the show.
I appreciate your call. Thanks for waiting on me today, and take care of yourself, all right?
Thanks, you too.
602. Thanks for waiting. You're on the Thinking Atheist podcast. What's your name?
My name's Chris out of Phoenix. How are you doing today?
What's going on in Phoenix?
Hot and hot. About 100
already? It's April. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
We went and did a shoot down there.
Coming out by now.
We went down and we did a shoot in Phoenix in August down there. It's like 120 degrees. 120? Is that normal?
Yeah, exactly. Rumor has it that because we've got a lot of troops out in the Middle East, that they're training out here to get used to the temperature. Who would have thought?
I trained in Phoenix. I'm invincible. What's your perspective on homeschooling? What's your opinion?
Well, I can tell you just from personal experience that mine wasn't religious or parents enforced. It was a medical disability I had when I was a kid. And as far as what I can tell you, the education quality was horrible. It was really just one teacher from a school who helped out, kind of like a substitute who's just there available to take care of a secondary priority.
Now, wait, you were not taught by a parent? You were taught by a teacher from the school?
Yeah, it was from the school within the district, not exactly the high school that I would have gone to had I not had that medical disability. It was basically epilepsy at the time.
Okay.
And the education quality was horrible. It was very basic, didn't even get far into it. And it would be these phone calls, of course, like a 3 or 4-way call for anybody who was homeschooled in my neighborhood or within the vicinity of X amount of miles, not sure. But it was about an hour on the phone, just this big phone call between like 10 students and a teacher. And as far as the quality of education, it was just horrible. It was 2 hours, and then that was it. It was just a homework assignment, and I'd be twiddling my thumbs waiting for friends to get off school so we can hang out.
So were you like a chore that had to be finished for this teacher? It was kind of like, do this, finish this assignment here, here's your last test grade, bye. Or was there another problem? Why wasn't it good for you?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I said, it was on the phone, so there wasn't any clip. You're not looking at any chalkboard.
Oh, wait. You didn't have any one-on-one personal? It was all done over the phone?
Almost all of it. There was a couple times where the teacher did visit for specific topics, but almost all of it, like, what can I think of? I think some of the basics of science and history, but of course as far as math, that's when you had a teacher come in, because you can't just talk out over the phone to teach it. But as far as the history and science aspects of it, yeah, that was just very basic stuff over the phone, and even then it didn't go into the details of it. Like for World War II coverage, it was, here's the villains, here's the countries, here's how long the war took, and here's who won, here's who lost. That was pretty much all it really did.
Did you graduate? Did you get a diploma?
Yeah, I did end up getting it. It was from, let me see.
Well, I mean, I don't need you to spill the beans on which school it was, but...
No. I was going to say which years. It was 7th and 8th grade, and then freshman and sophomore year. And it wasn't even a full-time kind of student amount of schedule. I had to do extra credits when I went back to school junior and senior year, which was basically after I had surgery and was able to finally go back to school because it was no longer an issue, but it was almost like a half-time student, and I had to do summer classes just to graduate on time with all my friends.
How you doing health-wise these days? You back? You doing good?
Oh, yeah, I'm totally back. I mean, what happened was pretty much. Do you want me to get into medical details?
Well, I've just got a minute, but when you said epilepsy, obviously I'm thinking, how are you? Are you okay? Are you well, you know?
Oh, yeah, doing fine. I mean, they basically had me on some it was like an antidepressant / brain mood drug until that, and then, of course, I had almost cold turkey antidepressants that I was on all my life from that because it acted the exact same in the way. But it wasn't until my mid-20s that I became human. But what I was going to say is, like, a lot of this from being homeschooled, social skills were horrific. Like, when you start hanging out with friends again and going back to school, which was my junior year, it was probably years behind on having any kind of social skills. It took plenty of time to recover. And another example I can remember was tragic is I would miss field trips with friends. Like, my junior high did a Six Flags field trip, and I couldn't go because I wasn't going to that school anymore.
What about dating? I mean, you're a teenager, right? I mean, you've got the natural inclination to keep your eyes and ears open. I mean, how does one who is isolated from people scratch that particular itch, if you know what I mean?
It's almost near impossible. I mean, you're not really at school talking to anybody, so there's not a lot of girls to hang out with except for whoever lives on your street. And it's just almost nothing could happen. It was the complete isolation. Besides, of course, the educational quality, it was complete isolation. And what I would also mention, a downside of it, it prevents the work schedule getting used to the routine. You know, you go to X amount of classes, you take a lunch break, you go to X amount of classes, and your day ends. That's what you do at school, and that definitely wasn't the case with being homeschooled.
Wow. So that's a thumbs down from you, I'm guessing.
Yeah. The only two benefits, the only benefits I would say actually came out of it is by being stuck in the home for so long, I'd rather leave the house and go to work and call in on a day that I just don't want to work. Wow. And I'd rather stay at work and finish than procrastinate until the next day because I just don't want to be in the house.
Well, I'm glad you're doing better, and I appreciate you calling the show and letting us know that, I mean, honestly, it's a tough one. I think I just have this vision in my mind of a guy, right? He's not allowed to date. He's not allowed to do anything. He's never been to a movie that wasn't rated G and had Disney over the title. He barely owns a television. His whole, everything he reads, everything he watches, everything he says is monitored. And then he's 18 and goes out on his first date, and he's looking at, he's looking at, What do I do? What do I do? That's just the visual I've got. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how it happens. Just trying to recover your social life and even be caught up. I mean, it was probably until my mid-20s until I became human.
Yeah. No. You were human all along, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Thanks for the call very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
He's probably takes her out to a little ice cream parlor, someplace safe, Make sure you're not in a van or anything, a pickup truck. First date, take her out. What do you do with her? I mean, she's shaped like a man, but with bosoms. What does one do? I think about my high school experience, and I was a goofball. Everybody was stupid when they're in high school. I was a student leader. I was a student council. I was this, I was that. But I was also just a kid. I'm going out on dates. We're going to the football game, and we're doing this, and we're doing that, and dated. I was all over the place. But I look back, and I'm thankful for those memories because even the messy ones, even the ones where you thought, boy, I screwed that up. Right? That's part of learning how to deal with people, learning how to deal with feelings, learning how to socialize. Geez, there's somebody I know who lost their teenager, a girlfriend broke up with him, heartbroken, right? And don't give me that song and dance that teen love doesn't matter. Trust me, it hurts. It hurts really bad. I mean, heartbreak is real. And Am I happy that the poor guy's girlfriend broke up with him? No, but I'll tell you, he's learning about relationships. He's learning about life. He's learning about the complexities and nuances of dealing with other flesh and blood human beings. He's becoming stronger. He's learning about himself, learning about other people, learning what he wants, what he doesn't want, what he did right, what he did wrong. This is important stuff. And if you're inside four walls, and you have to be given the opportunity to shore up the social side of it. And honestly, I don't know that I would want to be home all day with mom and dad, or mom, or dad. Would you? Get me the hell out of here. I want to go hang with people. If I'm here all day and I'm here all night and I'm here on the weekends, my head is going to pop off. Anyway, it's been a great show and a lot of wonderful perspectives. Thank you so much for the emails and the calls. We may address this again. We have a lot to do here in the weeks and the months ahead. I will try to post a new podcast schedule on the Facebook page. If you are not a member of the Facebook page, I do encourage you to log on, become a part of it, because it's a great way to connect with what's happening, get the show schedules, find out what we're doing, getting set for some exciting presentations. I'm going to Kamloops in British Columbia on May the 18th, and I believe they are going to post those speeches online later on. And then I'll be speaking at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention on June the 23rd. And we're going to I'm working on logistics of trying to get that event videotaped so that we can provide those to all of our YouTube viewers as well. It's going to be like my second year to go and speak in front of my hometown audience, and I'm nervous. It's going to be exciting, but I'm nervous. So anyway, be listening in the coming weeks for some very cool stuff. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. I will see you next Tuesday night on the Thinking Atheist radio podcast.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.